when I was born, I had, they had to actually break my feet. And this is common for the degree though was so bad with my feet being bent and I had to be put in a cast. And so they told my mother that I might not be able to walk normally, that whole story. And I remember, man, like being an infant, not like baby, but like I remember banging my legs up against the couch, having these braces on my legs, right? I was on my Forrest Gump shit, all right? But like Forrest Gump, like high school, 15 years old, I ran a 4.5 40, and everything was looking good. My aspirations for, playing at the next level. And it's just kind of like folks started to rally around me, like Shawn's that guy. But my body started to break down. And I was making my body, my tissues. I was at track practice that same year that I ran that 4.5 40, doing a 200-meter time trial. And I was just running, just me and my coach, and my hip broke because my body was so deficient. My bones were just degenerating. And instead of the physician, the system, the way that it's structured, it's just standard of care. Stay off the leg, take some NSAIDs, you gave me like some ultrasound treatment, which by the way, that's super cool. By the way, sound can heal you, but that's a whole other conversation. Yep. But here's the thing. Nobody stopped to ask, how did a kid, 15 years old, break his hip from running? Nobody asked that question. And it goes back to the thing we started the show with. Our bodies are made of the things that we eat. And I grew up in an environment where I didn't know that there was a difference. As many people listening, they feel the same way when they grew up. Like my family had no idea. I come from a family of folks who are obese, diabetic, heart disease. I've lost so many loved ones, and we just ate. We didn't know that there was a difference. I didn't know the difference between a fish stick and wild caught salmon. Like it's just stuff you eat. And also to take that even further in the environment that I eventually found myself in as a child, we were on food stamps. We were getting food from like shelters and, food pantries, things like that. I had the worst of the worst, but on paper, like the government was like Women, Infant and Children program, the WIC program. Like these are the things you need, like to have healthy kids. It's all fortified with vitamins and minerals. But the reality was also the structure of food in our country. And this is also something I talk about in the book. So people, because I think we often don't realize this, the reason that I could have went to McDonald's and got a meal for $3, fries, burger, soda, and a little snack and a little fucking toy for $3. But then an avocado costs $3. Something that's so energy intensive to create, that burger and all this, the soda, all the manufacturing, all the processing, all that goes, it's so energy intensive and expensive to do. How could it possibly be the same price as an avocado that can essentially fall off of a tree, right? How? And it's really because of the economies of scale. It's because of investments by our government that's looking out for us into big food corporations. And so government subsidies, they provide hundreds of billions of dollars. And I went and actually, I'm very much like, show me the money, like Cuba Gooding Jr. vibe to me, like I got, let me see, show me the money, because I don't want to just like make assumptions. And so I went and looked at it and I could not believe how much money our government invested into these subsidized crops, right? So mainly like wheat, corn, which is used massively for sugar, and then factory farmed animals. And being that this is the case, again, hundreds of millions of dollars, and I want to share this with everybody today, and this is direct from Eat Smarter. I wanted to find out, okay, so we know we have these subsidized crops. Does this actually affect our health? Do we have any data on this? And boy, did we. So they actually looked at folks who had the largest consumption of these government subsidized crops that largely show up through the drive-through window. These are largely what's found in processed foods. Now, I want everybody to really get this. After adjusting for major socioeconomic factors like age, sex, and countless other variables, they found that the folks who had the highest consumption of subsidized foods had nearly a 40% greater risk of being obese. This directly translated over these subsidized crops that our government is investing in, literally hundreds of billions of dollars, is directly showing up as a 40% increase in the risk of being obese by eating these same foods that they're investing in. And it might have even started, and this is the thing about me, it's always balanced. It might have started with good intention to feed Americans, but the money going to farmers growing fruits and vegetables is nil. It's almost nothing. These commodity crops are getting all the money. And this is what people are largely eating, whether we realize it or not. It's just
that
usually
drives,
go to
it
grocery
drives the
store.
cost efficiency, right? Like that subsidy drives the cost efficiency, drives the economy of scale, which then allows there to be that 99-cent burger, you know, because it's subsidized beef on subsidized wheat, on subsidized with subsidized corn syrup, with subsidized everything. And so it allows something to actually be cheap. And I think that's the beautiful point that you're making. What happens if we had subsidized avocado? And that's where it gets really curious, because the research, at least the mainstream understanding of the benefits of fat, especially the fat that comes from avocado, and how actually, if you just wanted to have an avocado, it's one of the best things that you could possibly do. Have an avocado and some sea salt. All right, maybe you'll shift over into ketosis, which is fine. Like, we'll all be good. And actually, that might be a nice restart for our metabolic health, even if that's all we had. Like, if I had to pick one food, it was like, bro, all you got is one food for a month. It's like, oh yeah, avocado, easy. You know, I'll jump into ketosis. It'll, you know, it's not what I normally eat, but it'll be good for me and I'll be fine. I'll come out of that after the month. And, you know, obviously there's different micronutrients that I'd certainly want to support myself with. But if that was like the one main food, that would be it. But there's not that awareness, because we're still stuck in an old paradigm of like the bottom of the food pyramid being, you know, these grains, and then not even worrying about. So what you're saying is we are made up of what we eat, but what we eat is made up of what they eat, which is made up of what that eats. And even a plant has to eat the vitamins and minerals from the soil in a way, you know, bring all that up. And then it's just fertilizer and, you know, all of the things that kill all the crops, all of the different contaminants that are put in to keep the crops alive. So we have to follow the chain all the way back to the beginning of the cycle to understand this whole process, and then reevaluate, okay, there's bad science in the government's mind, or at least a bad momentum of bad science.
Yeah.
You know, this idea of the food pyramid, and then there's no action, there's no compulsion to change. Even though we know better now, we're still doing the same thing because momentum has taken over. Because if there was a fucking avocado subsidy and it was like, listen, free avocados for everybody, you know, people would be getting super creative with avocados and they'd be like thriving with it. And they're like, all right, I'm into this. And like that one thing could change the metabolic health of the nation, like that.
But it has to be the mission of the system in and of itself.
Right.
And when I said subsidy earlier, and also saying that our government is investing, what that really means is we are paying for it. That's the catch. We are paying for it. And if we start to understand our power and we demand, because a lot of these folks in these political offices, they're just, it's a popularity contest. They're just wanting to be liked. They want to do whatever it takes to be in that position. They will address the issues that you demand, you know? And so this is what I'm directing folks to as well, is like, here's some actionable things that we can actually do to help shift the momentum of this thing. And I think you also brought up another point, like even, you know, terms like ketosis and looking at the different types of foods. We've gotten into this place, and I know a lot of folks here in this community, we're like infighting about minutia, when the vast majority of folks are still basing their reality, their diet on that food pyramid. I was one of those guys. I was in a conventional university auditorium nutritional science class learning this shit. I was told to tell patients I work with to eat 7 to 11 servings of grains a day. My teacher was overweight. My teacher he came in the door, his belly came in first. That's the first thing I noticed. But in my mind at the time, I'm just like, oh, he can't. I related nutrition to fitness. I was like, he can't tell me how to be fit. I didn't know. I didn't know. But and the thing is, he was incredibly smart. But and I know he got stuck in these same patterns that we got to talk about right now, of doing the thing he's teaching and hurting himself and trying to keep doing it harder and harder and harder because this must be the way that it works. This is what I was told. And so when a diet is not working for us, even if, especially if it works for a time, and then all of a sudden it stops working or we start to have negative results, we're just like, I'll just do it harder. It's me, it's my fault. I'll just paleo harder. I'll vegan harder. I'll keto harder. Instead of looking at like, hold up, I have a unique metabolic fingerprint that has never existed before in human history. This cascade, what I have, and it will never exist after me. As a matter of fact, the metabolic fingerprint that I have today is not going to be the same as it will be next week. We are incredibly dynamic and fluid and changing. Health is incredibly dynamic and fluid and changing. And we tend to put ourselves, and these diet frameworks are wonderful. They have been life-saving and life-changing for countless millions of people. But we do not want a framework to become our prison. We have to do what's right for us. And so I wanted to create a book that was a unifier of all of the best frameworks, and also targeting what are the specific things on whatever diet framework we have that are directly causative of excessive fat gain or directly causative of heart disease or diabetes. And we went through all those things. And so one of the biggest things that we have to get past as a society today, and that, man, I love this. And we talked about this before we got started. Like, we're into these shows that have like this like graceful intrication or input of history, right, built into it. You were talking about The Last Kingdom on Netflix, and that story of the Danes coming in the UK and all that, and Uhtred of Bevenberg, right? We're talking about Uhtred, and even right now, I'm just wired up this way. I ask, where did this come from? When I hear an idea, when anybody's talking about anything, I immediately think like, where did that come from? Right? Just the most random things. And so this term calorie, and I really got face to face with it for the first time. When I was in my college class, this was the monarch. This was the emperor. This was the warden of all nutrition, is the calorie.
Calories in, calories out.
That's it. You do it and you're good. Now, here's the thing. The history itself. This is what we need to know. Where do these ideas come from? When the calorie was discovered, just by the way, if we just want to use our own basic logic and just kind of what we've seen, when we see the pyramids and the hieroglyphics, there wasn't shit about a calorie. Hippocrates wasn't talking about you count your calories, right? Food is medicine, medicine, food, count your calories. It wasn't a thing. Nobody was looking for it when it was discovered. As a matter of fact, it was used in physics and engineering. It wasn't even we weren't looking for a measurement of food, energy. And eventually, it was Wilbur Atwater who kind of transitioned it into the nutritional domain. And I go through and take everybody through the process because there's other steps here. But here's where it really got crazy. A woman named Dr. Lulu Hunt Peters. If you want to know why the calorie is the dominant factor in American diet or just diet in general in the world, it's largely thanks to Dr. Lulu Hunt Peters. And she's a pioneer, absolutely. And she wrote a book in the early part of the 1900s that basically, and by the way, it was a massive bestseller. This book sold 2 million copies. At this time, is basically like everybody and their sister had this book for real. All right. So when we talk about the permeation of ideas and culture, this is really one that changed the entire outcome of our society. And so this was a time, and I went back and actually read her old fangled writings, and I was shocked that some of these things were being impressed upon our culture. This was when food went from being this very dynamic, multifaceted entity that literally creates our heart, that creates our brains, enabling us to have thought and feeling and emotion, that makes up our mitochondria, that creates the energy for us, that creates, again, the very heart that's beating in our bodies made from the food we eat. It went from being this multifaceted, dynamic thing to being numbers. And she said, from here on out, you will no longer eat food. You will eat calories of food. You will no longer eat a slice of bread. From now on, you will eat 100 calories of bread. You will no longer eat a slice of pie. From now on, you'll eat 350 calories of pie. And she maintained that a woman of her height could eat whatever she wanted as long as she ate 1,200 calories a day. And she battled with her weight her entire life. That's the part that's left out again. Just like my teacher. She was doing the thing. but it was not working. And she also impressed upon our culture. This is what she did to herself. This is where it was integrated in our culture, associating food with morality. And if you can't do this, it's a character defect. This isn't something wrong with the nutrition approach. It's something wrong with you. And there were words in these writings like punishment and sin. And also, this was the first time that it was impressed upon culture that hunger is the target. If you're hungry, you're doing it right. And she said, this was during the time there was like food rationing, right? World War I. She said, when you're hungry, when you experience a hunger pain, you should have a double joy, knowing that you're saving the hunger pains in another person. And creating this belief structure in our world based on deprivation, restriction, and punishment, and seeing food as numbers. And we're still doing that shit. And I'm fucking tired of it. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. And so that chapter, we're about to turn that page. I'm done. Food is so much more than a caloric measurement. And as a matter of fact, what I did was I went and I found 5 specific things that actually control what calories do in your body. And every health expert that's promoting, all you need to do is calorie deficit, and you'll get there. No, we've got the data now, and everybody's going to know this.
It's good because, obviously there's a lot of things that I wrote about in Own the Day that are similar to what you're writing about here, because we cover nutritional diversity of food. And even one of my chapters, eat a weird lunch. And it's encouraging people to go reach for those foods that are outside of the box, those things that they haven't tried. Maybe it's oysters, or maybe it's, something even more odd. Like I just had, Paul Saladino in there, and he always comes to my house, the carnivore doc, and he has a bull testicle in his backpack, and he's always trying to get me to eat that slippery thing. And I'm like, nah, bro, like I get it. I'm sure there's nutrients in that testicle, but like, I just can't, man. I love you, but I fucking can't. But nonetheless, like if I was really that committed to getting those nutrients, for sure, eat that raw bull testicle that he just harvested or whatever. But, these ideas about going and grabbing all of these other food sources, paying attention to your macronutrient profiles, making sure that you're supporting yourself with enough fat. I'll put some of this stuff out, and reliably somebody will say, this is all bullshit, man. This is all bullshit, bro. It's calories in, calories out. It's been decided. Science has determined it. And you don't need to talk about this shit.
Let's talk about this right now.
Unbelievable.
Listen, first of all, shout out to Paul Saladino. He's like the 2020 Dora the Explorer, right? Ball sack, right?
Yeah.
Pulling it out. Map. I'm the map. Anyways, so here's one of the coolest things. And this is something that's been kicked around for a while. Like, it's the quality of foods. It's not just the calories, it's the quality of the calories. Now we know for certain. All right. We got some really great data on this. So this was published in the journal Food and Nutrition Research. And they want to find out what happens when folks, to their calorie expenditure, when they eat a meal of whole foods versus a meal of processed foods. And what they deemed to be a meal of whole foods was whole grain bread and cheddar cheese. All right. So they had some test subjects to eat their whole food sandwich versus a meal of processed food, which was deemed to be white bread and cheese product. And cheese product, that's Kraft. All right. That's what Kraft is. They can't legally call their shit cheese because there's not enough cheese in the cheese. All right. So these two sandwiches, so folks eat either of these two sandwiches. On paper, the sandwiches are the same amount of calories, same amount of proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. But here's what happened after they compiled all the data. The folks who were eating the processed food sandwich had a 50% reduction in their calorie burn after eating that sandwich. It created a hormonal clog. It changed the way their metabolism was working, so their body was less apt to expend the energy that they consumed. It changed what their metabolism was doing because of the quality of food that they were eating. These foods that were so far from what's normal, so far from what's natural, so far from what your genes expect you to eat, that it changed their metabolism, creating these hormonal clogs. So again, same amount of calories on paper, but we have a problem, Houston, for real. Like, we've got a real problem. And that's just one factor. That's the type of food. And I actually take people through, it's called the DM. All right. It goes down in the DM. That's the acronym for this. And what it is because of the underlying premise that your hormones are such a powerful entity in this conversation that's overlooked too often. Your hormones are essentially chemical messengers that are communicating data throughout all the trillions of cells that you have. And when there is miscommunication here, they're sending metabolic DMs, metabolic text messages and emails and, pings. But when those messages start to, for example, if you look at leptin, right? Leptin is well noted to be our body's major satiety hormone, and it's produced by our fat cells. It's this poetry in nature. And so if you have excessive amount of fat on your body, you should be pretty satisfied all the time. Aha, that's not how it works. Because now that you have so much more fat mass, you're producing a lot of insulin, but it's like getting flooded with spam. It's like getting flooded with messages that are going to spam now. Your body's not even picking it up. There's a resistance to it, right? That's where leptin resistance comes in because there's so much of it happening, right? So to fix these things, and I call this the DM, in addressing how calories are actually controlled in our body, that's type of food is the first thing. The second thing is with the H is how the food is prepared also affects our ability to absorb or not absorb calories from our food. And anybody who's really looked at the kind of the evolution of the human brain will tell you that arguably the biggest jump, like the quantum leap in the development of the human brain, was thanks in part to our ability to cook food. Because suddenly we were able to extract so much more nutrition or so much more caloric energy. It still matters. Calories do. We can use it as some part of our lexicon to communicate. But now we're able to absorb and to get energy from foods we never could have gotten energy from before. And so because of that, cooking our food changes how your body associates with the calories or the energy you consume. And that's not there on your product label. It doesn't talk about that. And just to give people a really quick snapshot on this, if we look at one of the hottest foods, I mean, I think it's kind of like died off a little bit, but kale was popping. I mean, kale, people have the shirts.
Yep.
Paul Saladino got a ball in his bag. He does not have kale, right? For some folks, kale is like the holy grail. For other folks, it's just like it's a killer, But kale is just very popular. And now here's the thing. When you cook kale, no, I think this is the first premise. The older the plant is, the sturdier the cell wall. And so you're going to be less able to extract calories from the food. So the younger kale, like baby kale, baby spinach, automatically, boom, you can extract more energy. Or if you cook it, you break down the cell wall and now you can extract a lot more calories. And the density, because you go from like 2-3 big batches of or bunches of kale and you cook it, now you've got like a tiny little bowl, right? So the volume affects everything. So how the food is prepared mattered. And then the E is energy exchange, and it costs calories to absorb calories. This is not on the product label. I was taught this in school, but not like this, not in a way that actually applies to the real world. Proteins. When you eat a protein, you're going to use about 20 to 30% of the energy of the calories that you consume to digest that protein. So if you consume 100 calories of protein, all right, 100 calories of protein, you're going to burn about 30 calories to digest that protein. You got to take these complex protein structures and break them down in amino acids, all right? That matters. So it's the thermic effect of food. Carbohydrates, you're going to use about 10 to 15% of the calories you consume to digest those carbohydrates. For fats, in the ballpark of 0 to 5%. Our bodies are very good at digesting fats, all right? Shout out to the gallbladder, the liver, we're very good at digesting fats. Now, with that said, looking at what are we debating most about today, Aubrey, for the last couple of years? Again, the minutia, we're debating fats and carbohydrates the most. And nobody's saying shit about protein, barely, right? Proteins is like Rodney Dangerfield, like, I get no respect, it's just, but it's so important because of the thermic effect of food. And also we evolved eating dense protein source foods. But we've been inundated with this idea that Americans are consuming way too much protein. And I went and looked at the data. And what do you know? It's not true. It's not true. There are populations of people who are consuming what would be considered too much, but the quality of that protein matters, right? If they're eating protein like I was, when my body was breaking down, my hip broke, dude, if I got up in time, I'm hitting McDonald's. I'm getting that sausage biscuit. I'm starting the day with the sausage biscuit. I'm getting they had the 99-cent triple cheeseburgers. All right. I'm hitting that bad boy. I'm doing the stacker, the KFC stacker. You got the two buns are actually fried chicken patties. And then, so I'm eating like this. I'm eating these processed, low quality, factory farmed, diseased versions of these foods, right? That matters. So those are the three. And then the last two really quickly. So that was going down to the DM. These are controlling what calories are doing in our bodies. Oh, and also the Atwater, there's a great study that I shared. On the product label, 170 calories of almonds, for example, you only get a net gain of about 129 from those almonds that you just ate, right? Your body's using energy to extract that energy, all right? It's not accounted for. All right, so the E is, I'm sorry, THED. The D is digestive efficiency. And this goes back to our metabolic uniqueness. Every one of us, if Aubrey and I eat the same meal, him and I both can have hundreds of calories difference, even if we're eating the same amount of calories and how much our bodies absorb and expend. Hundreds of calories difference. And we're not, as far as like our leanness, body composition, we're not that far off. But our digestive efficiency based on the enzymes that you're producing, based on your bile, based on your stomach acid, based on your microbes, all of these factors are determining how you're able to extract nutrients from your food and also burn or store those nutrients. And this is not talked about enough. If there's like even a modicum of thyroid dysfunction, it can reduce your rate of calorie expenditure by hundreds of calories a day. That's just one factor. All right. So
I got to jump in here because there's something I read in your book, which I've always instinctively really believed about myself. There's this idea about you have a fast metabolism, and everybody's always told me I have a fast metabolism, whatever the fuck that means. But really, I started to understand and intuitively understand, especially, and you list this study as well, when they started replacing the gut biomes of certain mice that were overweight with mice that were skinny, and they replaced them. And then the skinny mice that got the gut biomes of the overweight mice became overweight. And so basically changed the quote metabolism of these mice based upon the gut biome, because what people are talking about with metabolism, they're talking about if you eat this much food, will you get fat? Like that's colloquially what metabolism is. And I cannot put on weight. And so I'm thinking about this and this mysterious thing called metabolism. Like what I know is that I can eat a bunch of food, but my body doesn't absorb that much food. Like for whatever reason, I can just keep eating and my body just will not turn it into fat storage. It just won't. And the only thing that makes sense is that I'm not absorbing it. And you just go right into it and you actually name, I think it's amucinophilis or something like that. You actually talk about this thing that I would always intuitively, like I got something that is different than other people. I get it, but it's not this mysterious metabolism. There's a reason for it.
how powerful is that this term fast metabolism, same here, this is the thing that I've been told as well, is actually rooted in your microbiome, your gut bacteria specifically. And this is really at the heart of it. And so this is actually the M. So the DM, THEDM, is your microbiome makeup. Has a massive impact on your body's ability to absorb and store and utilize calories. And so one of the studies that you're highlighting, this was published in the journal Cell. And they discovered there's a certain bacteria in mice that literally block their intestines from absorbing as many calories. But our conventional science will be like, let's get that bacteria and put it in a pill and try and get people that want it. Like I want my body to, people that they're drinking, they're swallowing tapeworms, to try to prevent their body from absorbing as many calories. It would be the hottest thing smoking, but will it work? Now, so here's the thing. Of course, we're not mice. In human studies, this was published by the Weizmann Institute, and I talk about this as well. We know, and when people would come into my office, if I had them to get a stool sample and I can look at their report, if I never even saw them before, if I never saw the person and I see their report from their stool sample, I can determine whether or not they're obese before I even see them based on their bacteria cascade. This is well known now. And so the Weizmann Institute knows that there's a certain bacteria spectrum or bacteria cascade that's associated with obesity and diabetes. And so they took these bacteria samples from folks who were obese, or these quote fat bacteria, and they implanted them into mice. They took the fecal sample and put them into lean mice. They also took samples from lean human test subjects and put them into mice. The mice that got the fat bacteria from obese human subjects gained weight, gained body fat, and became insulin resistant, while the mice receiving the healthy human samples did not. Now we stretch this out even further into the human test subjects. They took identical twins. All right? They're supposed to be identical, right? Now, I just saw a meme today. It was just like folks who are twins that aren't identical twins. It's just like, what was the point of that? You know, what was the point? But anyways, shout out to all the twins. But they took identical twins and they were able to look at their bacteria cascade. And when they found a twin that had a noticeable increased ratio of these, quote, fat bacteria, you know, most associated with obesity and diabetes, they tracked them. And even though they're in the same household, eating the same diet, and they're identical twins, the twin who had the bacteria cascade associated with obesity and type 2 diabetes became obese or gained weight, and the other one did not, eating the same diet. Our bacteria matters a lot. And that's the very thing that our system of medicine has been trying to kill for decades. Kill the bacteria. Haphazardly throw some antibiotics in there. Antibiotics in our food system. You know, pesticides, herbicides, rodenticides, toxicants, all these different things that damage our bacteria. They're designed to kill small organisms. This is not okay because, as the study found, the diversity of our gut bacteria is directly associated with whether or not we're gaining weight. And so if we can increase our gut diversity, we can dramatically reduce our risk for obesity. And that's one of the things we target in the book too.
So if you're going to break that down, because there's obviously, if you start with identical twins in the same house, there has to be other factors. Maybe that's one of the twins had an infection and needed a big long course of antibiotics, which then changed the ratio of certain gut bacteria and allowed some to flourish and some to decrease, and the other twin didn't. Little things like that can contribute. Maybe one was able to get access to a certain type of snack because they had a certain friend and they were eating more sugar, right? Like there's little factors that could start to create this divergence from identical to divergent. It's not like, well, it's just bad luck. You know, I mean, that's not the way that this goes. It's, you know, there's factors, there's things. So when you're thinking about those things and someone's thinking about their gut, you know, what are the basic steps that you can do? Most importantly, to repair your gut, you know, at the point that we're at now, to actually get you in that right state where you have the bacteria that's going to control this, quote, metabolism.
Yeah. And this just gets to the heart of it, which is the number one thing that we found to increase the diversity of your microbes is to increase the diversity of the foods that you're eating, which when you say that, it just seems like it's obvious because, and I've been talking about this for 15 years and I would have patients coming in, I was putting people on probiotics. The probiotics can't do anything. They cannot proliferate if they don't have their preferred food source, right? What we associate with these, you know, these friendly bacteria, you got Bacteroidetes and Firmicutes is like two major kind of camps. The Firmicutes are more associated with obesity, right? And so this thing is like, if you want to be firm and cute, you got to reduce the Firmicutes. I didn't make that shit up. I don't know even why I said it. But, so we want to have a better ratio here. But the thing is, the Firmicutes are not without their purpose. Everything needs to be in balance. And we can create this phenomenon today, and I experienced it myself years ago, of gut dysbiosis, right? Something's just off. And this is so common today, but we might not have, you know, when I was a kid, it was just called a tummy ache. Now it's like got all these different names, you know, but we might not have direct, quote, tummy symptoms. It might manifest as skin issues. It might manifest as pain in your joints. It might manifest as thyroid issues related to what's happening with our microbiome cascade. And we know this is well established now. But for most folks, if they're not experiencing, you know, tummy pain, they don't realize they have dysbiosis. And so how do we fix this? We have to provide, and this is category, and today I want everybody to really get it, prebiotics. We have to provide prebiotics for the probiotics to proliferate. and to transform our gut health. And there is data, and I just don't believe this. I don't like to talk in extremes, that found that basically some of these extinct bacteria that humans need to really thrive, once they're gone from your system, they're gone. You can't get them back. And I don't, but there is data showing that we can change. And so I just feel we have to really stack conditions in our favor to do it, because in our culture, especially if we're doing these different diet frameworks, we might pull out an entire category of foods that our genes, where we come from, our lineage, have been having for centuries, and we have a symbiotic, connection with this food that's feeding a certain strain of gut bacteria, that now that I pull this food out, and I might even feel better because I've taken it out, taking it and a bunch of other things out. But now those bacteria that have helped your ancestors to thrive, they had to check out. They've been evicted. They're out of there. And so now the diet's been working for a year, but now you're starting to have symptoms. Maybe the weight gain is coming back, even though you're doing the same thing. Maybe you're starting to have symptoms of, acid reflux, or maybe you're starting to have pain in your joints. This bacteria cascade that you needed is now parted ways. And so we have to be more judicious. We have to be a little bit more patient and careful about pulling foods out. And I think that the heart of the story,
because
at the very tip of the spear.
Elimination diet is the go-to, for pretty much, which is basically eliminate almost everything. And what you're pointing to is like, maybe in the case where you're having such strong inflammatory reactions to food for whatever reasons, and there's a lot of reasons we can get into that you have these inflammatory reactions, maybe you do need to cut some things out and then get down there for a little while. But as a permanent long-term strategy, if grass-fed beef is the only thing that works, or bone broth, okay, great. Like, do that for a little while, let your inflammation load drop, but you can't stay there. You can't stay there forever, and well, you can, but there's going to be other consequences for staying there. And I think that's a really good point that you're making.
Yeah. And if we just kind of hit the needle on the head with the prebiotics. So there's prebiotics, probiotics, and postbiotics, right? So the postbiotics are the things that your bacteria, viruses, fungi, archaea, these things that these microbes create things in you for you, this symbiotic relationship. These are the postbiotics. And so the prebiotics these are some of there's like a camp of prebiotics, which is pretty much every food is going to have prebiotic capacity, but they're generally put like Jerusalem artichoke, asparagus, garlic and onions, and inulin, from apples and all these different things. But again, these are putting them in this pithy little box. The reality is, as our ancestors would be doing, folks that are eating more of an indigenous diet, they're eating a wide array of foods based on availability. So even if everybody listening, even if you're eating what we consider to be healthy, all of us, we can get stuck in a rut, right? Like chicken, rice, broccoli, like chicken, asparagus, quinoa, you know what I mean? Like, we can get in these loops. And what I want us to do is let's practice adding in another couple of foods each week, right? Whatever it is, plant and or animal foods, because again, I don't want to get into the debate about which framework is best, but we do need to diversify the food types that we're bringing in, to invite in and to support, to help to proliferate. If you're eating, for example, fermented foods, fermented veggies, whatever the case might be, it's coming with a prebiotic already, being that it has that fiber along with the food. That's great. But to really proliferate and take hold, they need their preferred food source. All right. So last point, in the data, it's mostly plants, but I'm telling you, it's both. It's a both and world here. But if you can increase the diversity of plants, and that's the best data we have, you increase the diversity of your bacteria. And last point here, I think one that a lot of folks are going to be thinking about, hearing about more, is resistant starch coming up here in upcoming years. And that's a really interesting one too, but again, at the end of the day, there's many different types of fiber types. Bull testicles, I'm sure, again, it could be a prebiotic. It has prebiotic capacities because the bacteria are interacting with that food. Whether you get this or not, that's where the data is headed. And so if we can have a diversity of foods that we're taking in more intentionally, we're going to have better outcomes with our probiotics and the postbiotics they're able to make. Hey, if you like this video, make sure to check out this video right here to up-level your health today. Remove the cause of the disease. We have to remove the cause first. So, what is contributing to the degradation of our microbiome? This dysfunction with our microbiome is driving the obesity epidemic